Good morning and welcome to this Onward event on Building Back Better Together. How can civic service give young people a future after coronavirus? My name is James O'Shaughnessy. I'm a member of the House of Lords and chair of the Repairing Our Social Fabric programme at Onward. We have a star study cast for our discussion today, who I will introduce before they speak. What they're going to do is each speak for 5 minutes, and then we'll have half an hour at the second half of the session to get your Q&As, which I will put to the panel. Please use the Q&A function, and that way we can keep track of the questions that you want to ask, and please be liberal in the questions that you want to put to us. So about the event, and more importantly about the subject we're discussing, it is hard to overstate the effect the pandemic has had on younger generations. Between February 2020 and February this year, net employment fell by 693,000 jobs, and of these, 611,000 were among employees aged 18 to 35. We all know about the disruption to schooling, leading to the loss of millions of hours of learning. 700,000 young people were set to leave education and enter the job market last year under some of the most difficult circumstances imaginable. As Onward has set out in our Policies of Belonging paper, civic service schemes can generate meaningful employment through community and civic action, helping young people to contribute to society and generate valuable skills and experience. It is a model tried and tested around the world, and in the UK, our own National Citizen Service Trust will also be delivering a pilot for a new scheme this summer, UK One, which will put civic service for young people into practice in the UK. Today's panel is going to consider how best the government, private sector, charities and the NCS can work together to help support young people through civic service. We'll be exploring how UK One model works, how the pilot can be scaled and developed in future, and what else can be done to support the empowerment and employment of young people. And I want to thank the NCS for kindly supporting today's event. Now, without further ado, I'm going to invite our first speaker to speak. She is none other than Baroness Diana Barron. She's the Minister for Civil Society in DCMS, a member of the House of Lords since 2018, and has been deeply involved throughout her career in charities and the voluntary sector. Diana, it's a pleasure to have you with us this morning. I look forward to hearing you. Over to you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, James. Thank you so much for having invited me. And can I just start by also acknowledging, and I've said this to both you and Will in a smaller audience, but just how valuable we found your thought leadership on some of these issues at Onward and your very rigorous approach to reviewing them. And also just to echo James, if I may, what an extraordinary difficult 15 months or so this has been for young people. You talked about employment impacts, but obviously levels of anxiety and loneliness, which falls within my brief, are clearly also very high for absolutely good reason. And some of that is about confidence in the future and what does that future look like. And one of the best bits of my role is that I get to talk to young people very regularly. We have a youth steering group within DCMS, and I also try and meet with young people more broadly when every opportunity arises. And the thing that comes through again and again, which is why I think this morning's conversation is so important, is young people want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. They may have had the toughest year imaginable, but they want to be part of the solution as we emerge from it. And I think that chimes very well with what underpins the work that NCS in particular have done in this area. And certainly in our survey of young people, and you enter a special world in government where you get very, very excited when real people answer your surveys. We had over 5,000 young people answer our survey, and they talked about three things they really wanted to see from youth provision outside school, and one of the top three was volunteering and how could they contribute to their local communities. So I think, again, that's a really positive thing to be building on. Obviously, within DCMS, we work across a number of areas, and I'm happy to pick up on some of those in more detail in the Q&A. I did want to just in the last couple of minutes just comment and really congratulate Mark and his team at NCS for their extraordinary agility. I know we're all probably fed up of hearing the word pivot, but they have been pivoting like crazy through, in a good way, through this pandemic. There's been a great digital offer with a lot of really original content. There's been a massive push on supporting young people to volunteer, with almost 7,000 young people being involved in 200,000 hours of volunteering time through the summer 2020 within NCS. And there's been a great deal of very positive work with DCMS and the Department for Education about supporting year 11s and year 12s to return to education. I just want to commend you on that. I'm really interested to hear more and learn more about UK1, and very happy to take any questions as they emerge later. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Diana. And I think you know, you've raised 2 points there which are very important. One is that this isn't just an economic issue. This is about social issues. It's about mental health and other issues, and you know, that these solutions can work on multiple levels, not just about better career prospects, but better prospects for happiness and flourishing, which is just as important. I take great comfort from this response to your survey around volunteering and the desire to do it, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about that too. Thank you. So I'm sure we'll have lots of questions for you later. Great to hear from you. I'm now going to hand over to Danny Kruger. Danny is the Conservative Member of Parliament for Devizes. He has been a charity chief executive, setting up two very influential charities, Only Connect, which worked with ex-offenders, and the West London Children's Zone that works with children and young people. He chairs those charities and also sits on the board of Young Foundation, and I'm delighted to say on the steering group for the Repairing Our Social Fabric programme, and has been one of the great thought leaders in this area. So Danny, delighted to have you with us and looking forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, James, and very good to be with you. I'll echo Diana's point about the role that you guys have been playing in pushing this debate. I think something really positive is happening, which is that it is increasingly recognised the absolute centrality of civil society to our social settlement and to the society that we need to become as we emerge from this crisis. I did a report for government last year, which Diana very kindly helped with and welcomed, which suggested, a number of, just basically crowded in from many of the people on this call, including Mark Gifford and others, just basically ripped off all the ideas that are out there about how to sustain our civil society and this neighbourly sort of revolution that we all saw locally over the last year. And one of those ideas, which I know DCMS, has welcomed and has been working on, is the suggestion of a volunteer passport, a new bit of digital kit that would more effectively match the supply and demand of volunteers. And the opportunity there, using digital technology, is to plug the gaps and to mobilise the enormous resources that exist in our community to fix social challenges. And I suggested there'd be three broad headings under which that work could be done. I mean, crucially, it's not about just, getting unpaid workers to do government's job for it or to fulfill its political priorities. This would be a community-led and owned initiative. But there are functions that could be performed, one in public service themselves. So the traditional roles filled by volunteers is magistrates, special constables, also youth leaders, these other roles. Secondly, community support, so ongoing support as we saw through the crisis and the way neighbours look out for each other. That, I think, could be better organised and formalised going forward. And then third, and relevant to this debate particularly, is the establishment of an ongoing volunteer reserve, which would be available to respond to emergencies, as we saw, but also be a sort of standing body of people who would help with the ongoing challenges we face, particularly around conservation and environmental management. But there are many other functions that could be done on an ongoing basis. And I think there's a huge role for young people in that space. And I think, building on what work you've done, James, and others at Onward, creating proper service opportunities for young people. If we think about the sort of extended period of sort of post-adolescence, post-education, post-school that young people now have. There is a role, there's a gap in their lives that can and should, in my view, be filled by social service of one form or another. And increasingly, we are, models of that are emerging, and NCS is a crucial one. And we're not quite in the crisis we thought we might be last year, when we thought there'd been an enormous youth unemployment challenge. There will still be, there is and will be one, but actually we've got in many ways the opposite problem, which is a lot of vacancies in the economy. So I don't think we're going to have quite the youth unemployment challenge that we feared, although it's significant. But we still, as I say, do have this gap in young people's lives between education and career. And even beyond that, and crucially, we all think about the evolution of work for adults isn't going to be a case of being in a single career that takes up all of your time, 9 to 5, until you retire, and then you might have some time for volunteering. What we want to create is a culture and an economy and a society where people are doing work, both paid and unpaid, both for some possibly remote employer, but also for the neighbourhood that they live in or for some social cause that they believe in. And we need to design a system that supports that. There's a bunch of stuff that I would love to see young people particularly supported to doing, and I would be up for thinking about how we can use a benefit system to support that as well. I don't think this all has to be unpaid work, but there are different methods of remuneration, different methods of rewarding and acknowledging people's contribution. And I think the volunteer passport I mentioned should be a way of recognising and tracking and recording and rewarding people's contributions. But I mentioned in my report, volunteering with local schools, helping younger children with mentoring, academic catch-ups, sports, etc., visiting hospitals and care homes, taking part in environmental cleanups, biodiversity projects, restoring dilapidated youth clubs, community centres, retrofitting and insulating homes, schools and care homes, producing public art, gardening, landscaping, and more, as well as working with Scouts, NCS, others to support younger children, young people. I'll just leave it there, except with this observation that Andy Haldane at the Bank of England has calculated somehow that by 2050 that we're going to have a doubling of the number of surplus hours in our economy as people live longer and find more time in their lives. There is a huge resource to draw, and I think young people are the heart of that. And the sooner we can get them doing that, building a lifetime and a culture of service, the more we'll be able to capitalise on the opportunities. Thanks.
Thank you, Danny. And that really was a landmark report that you published, and I know has been very influential on many people's work. I think just to reflect on one point that you said about the centrality of civic society to our recovery, I think that is understood to a degree of depth now that was probably never been the case. I mean, even the integrated review, which is primarily about our national security, talks about the creation of a civic cadre. And so there was a real understanding that we need to do better about knitting together the institutions of society, getting more people involved, and the kind of resilience, as well as the opportunity to pursue meaning and purpose that they provide, is at the centre of what it means to national policy. And I think that is real progress. And you've done a lot to do that, to achieve that. It's a perfect segue to our next speaker, who needs really no introduction. Former Education Secretary, former Home Secretary, one of our great parliamentarians, former chair of and on the board of National Citizen Service, and many other things besides. It's great pleasure to welcome my friend, my noble friend, David Blunkett, to speak with us this morning. So David, we are in your hands.
Thank you, James, and I very much look forward to doing what you and I have done in the past, which is to work in collaboration with each other, and I'm doing it with Diana. She might not always realise it, but I am, and I'm very pleased to do so. We've got all kinds of pieces of legislation, some of which are relevant to what we're talking about this morning. I first got involved when I was 16. I volunteered from the School for the Blind that I was in Shropshire to go and see an old lady called Mrs. Plum on a Saturday morning. And when I was leaving to go back to Sheffield at the end of the course, I went to see Mrs. Plum, and I was about to say to her how glad I was to have been of some service to her over the previous year, when she said, "David, I've been so pleased to have been of help to you over this last year." And I realised just what it was, a two-way street, that everyone gets something out of this. This is a win-win. And as Danny said, it can be volunteering and it can be service, and the two are not exactly the same, but they run in parallel. And I've been very keen when I was on the NCS Trust, now the Royal Charter body, to emphasise that this was a journey, a civic journey, from understanding and education in schools through the experience of volunteering with NCS into other activity that would take people on a lifelong journey of being able to give back something to society. And what I'm contributing today is as the residual NCS Community Interest Company with Stephen Green, the former chair of NCS Trust, who were charged with the oversight of the money that was not donated by the government, not provided by the government, but donated elsewhere. It's taken us a little while because of the last 16 months of the pandemic to make the allocation. We wanted to get this right, and it wasn't possible to do it over the last 18 months, but it is now. And the proposition we're putting forward, working with Mark and the now NCS RCB, who will have oversight of this, and with partners in the field, is to use a substantial amount of the remaining money to set up what I think will be seen, I hope, as a pilot programme that government from DCMS and Work and Pensions might be able to support in the longer term, and perhaps the Unclaimed Assets Fund as well, Diana, to actually help do this. A journey, a year of service, which between 9 and 12 months will give young people the opportunity and to be paid to actually deliver service in the way that Danny's described, a whole range, a menu, if you like, of opportunities. There's nothing entirely new about this. AmeriCorps in the United States, when I was at Education and Employment from 97 to 2001, we set up Millennium Volunteers with what was then Community Service Volunteers, of which I'd been a trustee. I did declare my interest in that. Sadly, as we all find in government, James and Diana, you set something up and then somebody else comes along and they do away with it, and then people reinvent the wheel. And I hope that as part of the work of Onward, we can actually join people up so we don't have to restart things. We learn from what we're doing and then we carry it forward together. Getting the voluntary sector, the civic society, to work together nationally is much harder than it is locally. People are giving of their time, their commitment, their expertise and experience on a daily basis across the country. We've seen that during the pandemic, what people are prepared to do, and that's been one of the more rewarding aspects of the last 15 months. But getting the voluntary sector to work together on a national basis, as I found when I was the founder chair of Youth United, I was asked to do that when some money was allocated for the uniformed organisations. I found a nightmare. So let's try and do this together. And the year of service, which will work with Kickstart money as well as with the resource that we're able to allocate, will employ initially 150 youngsters by August, and then somewhere between 250 and 300 additional ones over the winter to make a cohort of 400 to 450 young people having a long and valuable experience. And the reason I think this is something that we could build on is that through NCS, we can get people on the journey from school into the journey. Then we can give them the experience, because people are always saying, we'd love to give you a job, but you haven't had any experience and you haven't had life experience, and then get them to be part of that lifelong commitment to volunteering. So James, that's what we're putting forward, and I'm very grateful to Mark for helping us to carry that forward.
David, thank you. I think that was a brilliant exposition about the purpose of this year of service, something that we in Onward have also been promoting and are going to be talking about more in our upcoming Age of Alienation paper. Obviously, getting this going is going to require young people to want to do it and to be attracted to not only the format, if you like, but also the mission. The kind of activities that would feature in that year of service, and Danny's outlined some, but we know that young people are very mission oriented, and it's got to appeal to their hearts as well as their heads. And so I think this is a perfect opportunity to hear now from our next speaker, who is Jess Ogunagweki. Jess is a social mobility commissioner since 2018. She is a graduate of NCS, a presenter for BBC Earth, and a host for Apprentice Nation, and also sat on the NCS National Youth Board. Jess, you're really welcome this morning, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so my name is Jessica Ogunegweki, and I'm very pleased and honoured to be part of this amazing panel today very in awe of these people. I'm 23 years old and a Social Mobility Commissioner, a Director at the Association of Apprentices and Full-Time University Student. We know that under 25s have been hit extremely hard by the pandemic, especially as they are twice as likely to work in a sector that's been shut down. They are also more likely to have been furloughed than any other age group. In the first 3 months of lockdown, half of eligible 16 to 24-year-olds were placed on the scheme. And of course, mental health has also been impacted greatly by this. And I think that's partly why I'm so excited for this programme to launch, as it focuses on providing young people with the skills and opportunity to enter the workforce whilst giving back to society. Being a Social Mobility Commissioner is one of the proudest things I've ever accomplished, but it wouldn't have happened without participating in NCS, creating networks which allowed me to meet Stephen Green, the CEO of Rockcore and intern at Rockcore, participating in much more social action. It was at Stephen Green's citizenship event where I spoke about the importance of civic engagement, where I was later invited to an interview to become a Social Mobility Commissioner. The domino effect of NCS has impacted my life in so many ways. Even the act of being so independent and travelling solo to attend NCS National Youth Board meetings in London allowed my parents to trust me enough to move to London by myself at the age of 16 to attend Performing Arts School, which led me to work at the BBC and even become a presenter for BBC Kids. When I was 15, my friend encouraged me to participate in NCS during the summer, and I had no idea what it was or what it would involve. And I had no idea that it would teach me all about leadership skills. I'd get introduced to politics for the first time and learn more about cultures I hadn't even heard of before. Through this, I became a member of Youth Parliament for Norwich North, working with my local MP, discussing how to improve life chances for young people in my local area. And I had no idea at this point that I had naturally started campaigning on improving life chances for young people, or that this would become a natural career opportunity for me. Through participating in the NCS Leaders Programme in the autumn of 2013, so a while ago, it catapulted me into a new world of social cohesion, volunteering, and being able to not only learn and be passionate about social issues, but actively get involved and help fight against them, finally finding a purpose. I believe a positive takeaway from COVID is that it's inspired a whole new generation of social activists. We've seen a whole new wave of role models emerge from an incredibly hard time. We've obviously seen, for instance, Marcus Rashford, an amazing footballer, advocating for the alleviation of child poverty and food poverty, and that's inspired a whole new wave of people to get involved in civic engagement. Without civic engagement, I wouldn't be where or even who I am today. It not only teaches you more about certain issues or movements or empowers you to believe that you have the ability to change the world, but it also introduces you to an array of different people you probably wouldn't meet in a day-to-day life. In my experience, these people who are of all ages, races, religions, backgrounds, and cultures enrich the experience just as much as the act of giving back. For people to just be able to collaborate with someone positively who they have preconceived ideas about based on their appearance can eradicate years of unconscious bias they have built. These people can also teach you something about new about the cause you're working for, about themselves, or other ways in which you could give back. And these people, as I've learned, as cliche as it sounds, can also turn into family. When I think about the amazing opportunities I've had so far in my very, very short career, a lot of qualities and experiences employers were intrigued by were experiences I had obtained outside of the classroom. In fact, I can pinpoint majority of opportunities I've had as an outcome of pushing myself out of my comfort zone, which started with the National Citizen Service that completely changed my life. Increasingly, employers in the UK labour market are demanding soft skills, including communication, adaptability, collaboration, and confidence, which is all built naturally via civic engagement. There is now a critical need for the government to support young people in obtaining and developing these skills. Our research in the Commission found a correlation between higher levels of these soft skills and upward social mobility. So I'm really excited to see this scheme kick off and how it positively impacts the lives of young people in the UK, because at the end of the day, everyone just wants a purpose and to feel proud and to give back. So this scheme would really do that.
Yes, that was just a brilliant exposition of why this is so important, and it's very easy to see why you're an ambassador for this cause. Thank you. I'm going to just, if I may, can I just ask you a quick question about this year of service idea? If you had been at the sort of right age that this is pitched at, is it the sort of thing that you would have wanted to do?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think one of the hard things about being a young person who's so ambitious is actually sometimes you're a bit time poor and sometimes you can't afford to volunteer. So to be paid for actually giving back and to develop those skills and to have security over the year to build those networks, I think would have been amazing. Right.
So that's a really important point. So it's definitely come up in work that we've done at Onward, which is, as you say, the time poor or indeed cash poor point, which is, volunteering is all very well, but might have rent, might have other bills to pay. If we want people to do this kind of work, we have to respect those kind of needs too. That's brilliant. Thank you. Jess, thank you for that. And then I'm going to move now to our final speaker, who is Mark Gifford. Mark is the Chief Executive of the NCS Trust. He's previously served in a number of roles in the John Lewis Partnership and elsewhere, and is also deeply involved in social action himself, including chairing a school that has helped to turn from requires improvement to good in Ofsted, and I'm sure helped improve it in many other ways besides that can't be counted. So Mark, it's a pleasure to hear from you, and we're looking forward to hearing a bit more about this idea, well, not idea, this pilot scheme for what I was told midway through the programme has been changed from the UK 1 to UK Year of Service. So we are literally live in the middle of policy development as it goes. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you very much, James. Well, that's my retail background. I think UK Year of Service does what it says on the tin, and that's what we're going to the market on. And I feel it's slightly in awe, perhaps my job here is done, listening to Jess and just what an amazing role model she is for that hope and optimism. And gosh, the ambition that you have, Jess, is just awe-inspiring. But also, if you think of the themes from the Minister around confidence and hope and young people wanting to be part of the solution, and David and Danny talking about that civic journey, that lifelong commitment, I think that's what we're trying to do here. So if we go back a stage, and then I'll bring this to life. The NCS vision is timeless. It's that country of confident, connected, caring citizens where everybody feels at home. Now, supporting young people to build skills and enhance their employability is a really critical part of this, which is why, alongside the NCS flagship programme that most people know, we're building a range of employability services that support young people on their journey from education into the world of work. And our Kickstart programme is already providing young people with opportunities to build their skills and work experience, and working with employers to make a lasting impact. And I'm so excited to be part of the launch today of the UK Year of Service, working as a national partner for the NCS Trust Community Interest Company, who are funding this great initiative. And a huge thanks to David and Stephen and the team here. This pilot gets to the very heart of the idea of civic service, supporting young people to make a positive contribution to society whilst building their skills, their experience and their employability. And they are supported by a compelling and highly experienced range of frontline partners. Because we've heard from Jess, we need that great level of support that's there. So our aim is to support young people in their future job prospects, enabling them to engage with socially driven career paths and connect them to roles that are critical and vital, not only to the COVID recovery, but also as we address the social challenges that the pandemic has worsened. And as we've heard from others on the panel, I think this is going to play a huge part, a really important part in rekindling the excitement and the investment in the social fabric of communities. And David's referenced it. We've seen other examples, overseas examples, such as AmeriCorps, of these kind of programs, how they can deliver economic benefits as well as social impact. Now, as we all come back to build better, it's the time to build on the work of those trailblazers, but in our space, and create a broad evidence that's in a UK context. And what we hope to do in the pilot over the next 23 months through evaluation is going to be critical. So we really want the engagement of young people, employers, policymakers to build and shape this initiative so it can be converted into a long-term national investment. And we see 4 opportunities that need really to be tested during these great pilots. One, and really, really critically important, impact for young people. Our aim is to deliver maximum impact for young people who participate, and we hope that the combination of enhanced employability with social purpose will support the overall well-being, mental health, and resilience of young people in the future. Second, social impact. We will engage young adults with jobs in areas of the economy that are either misunderstood or undervalued, which has the potential to build a better strategic pipeline of long-term employment in areas of strategic importance that we know deliver social value. And these first pilots will be in healthcare, public service and in the environment. Third, economic impact. We really need to look closely at the economic value of the model. We believe there's potentially what we're calling the triple effect of economic benefit. Firstly, through building young people's essential skills and employment prospects, will contribute to a dynamic labour market. Secondly, through enhancing their social capital, mental health, well-being, we will address challenges that can limit young people's economic potential. And through delivering wider social impact, we create the conditions for a thriving economy. And this cascade of benefits will deliver a positive return on investment over time. And finally, collective impact. We need to test the efficiency and the long-term sustainability of this model, this partnership model. We believe there's huge potential in matching government and private funding against a central idea, as well as supporting activity that can attract further local match funding, which is shaped and responds to the needs of local. So a huge thanks, James, to you for facilitating this, but particularly to Onward for bringing us together. That was a really important word I took from what David had described. How do we work together to make this lasting? So thank you to Onward for bringing us together to share our views on what I believe is a critically important national conversation and an incredibly exciting initiative.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. Well, I think we're all delighted not only to get behind this idea, but also to hear the level of detail that has gone into it. And I'm sure that there are questions already coming in. I mean, I would guess as well, you know, the part of the secret of NCS has been social mixing. Jess talked about that. That presumably is something you'll also want to be keeping hold of if you can as a benefit from this programme.
Absolutely. The three parts. We believe in social cohesion, which is driven by three things. Social mobility, so we're going to dial up employability for the reasons we've talked about. Social mix and social good. The benefit of NCS with its national scale and reach is it does mix people about. Jess articulated, you're talking to people from different cultures or backgrounds that you wouldn't necessarily have got from your circumstances, and that's at the heart and the richness of what we do.
Yeah, very good. Great. Well, look, if anyone doubted the importance of this, we've got over 100 participants in this event today and questions coming in. So that just underlines, I think, how strongly people feel about this topic. So I'm going to dive into the Q&A now. I will give every panelist a chance to answer each of these questions, but equally don't feel that you have to if you feel that what you would have said has already been said. So the first question is coming from Charles Rigby. And I think it's a very smart question, actually, which is, does the panel acknowledge the need to coordinate the youth offer between schools with an extended day and traditionally locally delivered youth services? So how might this programme, or indeed other programmes, integrate with what is going on in schools? Dan, if I could come to you first, I'm sure this is something you're very conscious of and working closely with DfE colleagues on. How do we square that circle and make sure there is clear accountability for who is doing what?
So I heard the question I was nodding confidently until you said clear accountability. So I might try and not trying to avoid the question, but I heard a slightly different element, sure, which is a bit about, you know, where is it sensible? Where's the best place to deliver these services, and what's the link with schools? And one of the things we did as part of the youth review was talk to a number of multi-academy trusts and other education experts, as well as colleagues at DfE. And the answer came back loud and clear that schools are very keen to coordinate and use their facilities where appropriate to deliver some of these activities. And there's definitely pros and cons. And there's an argument that for some kids, school is a really safe place, and for other kids, school is not a safe place, and some kids aren't in school. So we're not leaving people out of this. But I think the simple message I heard is that there is a lot more that we could do by working more closely with schools, which is not to shut anybody out, but how do we link the specialists in youth provision with the facility and ability to reach not just the young person themselves, but where appropriate to link in with their parents if there are particular issues that and staff that need addressing and support. So I think there's a lot more we could do to use school facilities intelligently while keeping a mixed model.
Yeah. And there's both schools, I guess we mean schools and colleges as well. And
yes, forgive me, I'm using, I'm using shorthand.
Yeah. And I think if we're obviously, this is a sort of, I think David explained it quite well as a stepping, these are steps in a journey, which starts off younger at 15 and then looking towards a sort of year of service at I guess a sort of post 16 or even post 18 age.
And
sorry,
very
Danny,
briefly, James, if I may, you can also flip it on its head. So there are organisations, for example, like Onside, and I'm sure there are others, who are making their facilities available to AP type provision during the day. So kids who might not get access to decent facilities do so as well. So it's how do we use our infrastructure intelligently, I think, is the exam question. Yeah.
David, you talked about this coordination problem or issue, and there's actually much better done locally often than nationally. And of course, you've chaired a multi-academy trust as well as your many other achievements. How do you think this is best integrated locally?
Yes, I think by identifying what's in the space and getting people to work together. Dame Julia Cleverton would never forgive me if I didn't mention that she was involved in Step Up to Serve, and there was an effort, of course, which you're familiar with, James, to do this. And things happen, like introducing citizenship into the national curriculum, and then they erode. And we've got to try and say, what's there? How do we use it? One reason why the NCS KIC is putting some money into the Association of Citizenship Teaching is to do just what the questioner was describing. The whole idea of citizenship in schools was about active citizenship, not just about taking a GCSE. And that after school activity is crucial to that, as young people learn what I was saying earlier, that this is a two-way street. What they give, they get back in spades, and it builds their confidence, their self-esteem. And you can do that after school, after college, in a way that is organized well. It needs to be fun. I mean, nobody wants this to be a kind of terrible bind where you're expected to go through it in a miserable environment. It's got to be fun and it's got to be enjoyable, because otherwise we won't persuade people to go on to all the kind of programs we've been talking about this morning.
Yeah, thank you, David. The questions are flying in, and so if it's all right with everybody, I mean, if Jess, Danny, or Mark would like to comment on this particular point, please do. Otherwise, I think I will crack on, because we've got so many questions and I want to give them a chance. So the next question is from Dominic, and he's asked about being involved with NCS through the EFL Trust for 6 years. Important, first opportunity for people to get involved in volunteering. The question is whether there's a chance to get involved earlier, I think is what he's asking, to the principles of volunteering. What can we do? How do we get this stepping stone? Is NCS at 15 followed by a potential of a year of service quite a few years later? Is that enough? Are we missing something? Jess, in your experience, how do people get excited about the prospect of being involved in these kind of programs?
I think that dynamics have definitely shifted when you've got people like Greta Thunberg, who are now like, an international sensation, and young people are really looking up to them and being inspired by them. I think that there's definitely an opportunity to introduce it earlier, but I think it definitely depends on who you're surrounded by. I know that a lot of young people are on social media, but I think it's more of the influence of your household or your school environment that sort of introduces you to new experiences. So I think that it would definitely be something that would need to be associated with school to get excited about as you're learning, rather than necessarily an outside scheme. I think that'd be quite hard for a lot of young people, but I definitely think that there is room to introduce it, especially as we're becoming a lot more socially conscious younger. But to be honest, I think Greta Thunberg's already flying the flag to make it look appealing and exciting to really care about different issues.
Yeah, so that raises an interesting question, Danny, doesn't it? That I guess you were trying to approach in your report, which is how to create that culture at in a family, community, and all the levels above that, so that actually it becomes not an expectation, but a norm, something that people do.
Yeah, and I'd echo that point that Jessica just made about the influence of household and community, rather than just the sort of the abstract culture of social media or even anything that politicians say that people should be doing. So we know how we could develop our attitudes. I think the other point to make is that these things cascade. So the great value of NCS is that it inspires younger children to think, when I get to 16, 17, that's what I'll be doing. And it inspires them to want to do it earlier as well. And I think that I mentioned the opportunity for young people, whether school leavers, students, people in their 20s, working with younger people, working with children on catch up, on sports, on scouting. You know, young people like slightly older young people. And so if we saw if primary school kids saw secondary school kids doing social action, they'd be inspired to do it. Just as secondary school kids seeing university students. So I just think there's a influence that we can make, and you know, the more, as Jessica says, that schools can get behind this, as many of them do. You know, my children's primary school is always doing community stuff. So I just think that's being part of the culture and the expectation, and that's something that DfE, Ofsted, local authorities can and academy chains can influence as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, I think one of the developments in, you know, since David introduced the citizenship programme, now obviously character in the curriculum, and now the expectation in Ofsted that you have to actually actively develop character among your pupils through exactly these kind of service opportunities is hopefully going to embed a lot of that. Mark, you know, your success at NCS totally depends on motivating young people to get involved. What have you learnt, or what's your organisation learnt over the last 10 years about how best to do that?
Great question. You're right. I mean, I see, again, I'll bring my retail experience here. Crudely, what we're wanting to make sure is, are we providing a service for the customer? And what's inspired me is the sheer number of people who want to do it. So on average, around 100,000 young people have wanted to participate in NCS. And I was worried, Diana very kindly talks about the pivoting of the trust, but I was worried when we didn't offer a residential service. Yet I was incredibly humbled and surprised when how many young people wanted to participate in different aspects of volunteering. Diana mentioned the stuff we did in the summer, which was the traditional things, and actually Danny referenced stuff, beach cleaning, supporting care homes, food banks, but actually there were bigger stuff. We went into partnership with the Charitable Retail Association to help charity shops reopen. We did some stuff with the blood transfusion service to 17. What was fascinating to me was, how can I get involved? So where's the hand holding to allow people access to the volunteering? Where's the support mechanism underneath them? So yes, having fun, as David described, but they're learning new skills, and there's a bit of a structure. So it's that non-formal way of engaging with them. Some of it's talking in their language. And I think one of the things we've done, and Jess is a great example, is reimagine what a youth voice looks like. So we've got youth boards, and we've got young people on our main board. We're more connected in regular pulse surveys. What are the needs of young people? What are they saying to us? Diana's referenced digital. Actually, how digital was a really good thing. So there's a bit around, you've got to be constantly in touch. You've got to try to provide a framework for young people to access it. And then they will make choices. And then they'll decide, this is the thing that I like. So what we learned last year in our pilots were some people gravitated towards healthcare and care homes. A lot wanted the environmental bit. Others wanted to do other things. Where's the choice? And if I just go back slightly to the other question that you had around the link with schools there and motivation, there's a real important job for organisations like us, who as an arm's length body should be supporting government as almost as a convener, because there are some great stuff taking place. So what's the run-in and the run-offs? So the kind of organisation that we are. And you've mentioned Scouts, Girl Guiding, UK Youth as other examples, Duke of Ed. And we've got a job to do to come together to help that and to motivate and engage.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I think, so I'm going to move us on now to another set of questions. So Vicky has asked about, pointed out that people have been using voluntary and civic service interchangeably, and asked for clarification about when and how young people should be paid for the service that they're doing. Similarly, Kevin has pointed out that lots of countries, and they've been referenced already, that have these kind of schemes, create a kind of third way, if you like, language resonant to David and others, I'm sure, between volunteering and traditional jobs. And also Scott has asked about the alternative or the opportunity of civic service as a sort of alternative to direct volunteering, but giving people, in a sense, a longer time to get stuck into these particular projects. So this seems to me a really important point here. Is there a risk that you end up spoiling the sense of service or volunteering if you have payment, or is it absolutely essential if we want people to commit to it for the longer term? And I suppose on top of that, and looking here to Diana as the minister, there's the cost of this. You know, one of the things about volunteering is it's free. One of the things about paid service is it costs money, and it may well cost the exchequer money at a time when the public finances will be squeezed, no doubt. So how do you, Diana, when you're thinking about this, how do you see this third way between volunteering and jobs, and how do you make the case to the Treasury that this is worth investing?
I guess my first thought is there's probably not a single model, because James, you captured very well, there's a tension between accessibility on one side, and Jess talked about time poor, but you also, I think rightly said cash poor. Most young people are cash poor in my experience, particularly the ones related to me. So you've got a kind of accessibility, whether that's time or money, and we want things to be accessible, but also you've got that sense of reward for having given, freely of your volition. So I don't think there's a single model. I think that it should remain in part with individual organisations how they want to structure this. In the case we're talking about this morning, it is tapping into an existing government funding stream in terms of Kickstart plus additional resources required. So I think in order to answer your question directly, in order to get Treasury support or other financial support, we need to be able to show both the social and the economic impact. But as Danny has shown in some of his work, you can do that through social impact bonds. You can do that in other ways than, if you like, in crude terms, an SR bid. And I think that there was also the subject was touched on about philanthropy. And I think I don't want to take too much time. We can come back to this, but we've seen a lot of corporates, I think, also shift their attitude over the last 15 months and feel that they want to do something to support their local community where they operate. So I think we should, I don't think it's one size fits all, but I think if there is real economic impact that's demonstrable, there are other ways to access funding than purely an SR bid.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dan. That's a point really well made. Well, you referenced some of Danny's work. I might, Danny, come to you on this topic. You are muted still.
James, I'm sorry, I was struggling to hear Diana there at the end. What's the question?
Well, I think about mixed models of funding, something that you talked about in your report. Yeah.
And also I was, sorry, James, I was also thinking of the social impact, collective impact bond work that you've done, Danny.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, we can get a bit, go down a rabbit hole of sort of financial wizardry on social action, and fundamentally we can't square the circle. Things cost money. Sacrificial giving is a part of this. We can't make it all pay and turn it into a market. But the fact is that good work in this space delivers real savings to the taxpayer, and there should be a way of arranging things so that the taxpayer can arrange for upfront investment from others that de-risk the government and then repays on results. So that's the principle behind the social impact bond. And then the collective impact bond, as Diana kindly mentioned, was an attempt to recognise there's a bunch of different budget holders who stand to gain from effective social action or prevention of social problems, and that they should be co-funding. And in West London, we have built what remains the sort of foundations of that, rather than we haven't yet got all of the different budget holders, whether that's justice or DWP or health, education, and to co-fund. But the opportunity is there, and ultimately my simple solution to everything in this space is localizing funding, because the local authority or some agency locally holds the different budgets, then or other different agencies at a local level hold the budgets, they can collaborate more effectively and pool their funding more than it seems possible for big national departments to do. But that's an enormous challenge as well. But the great value and what we learned, and Diana's work demonstrates this, is that a bit of philanthropy can go a long way, because it levers all sorts of other investments, and there are ways to achieve that, and there's a role of corporate philanthropy in this space as well. So yes, I heard Diana say there's no single answer. There's a whole bunch of different mechanisms, and we need to be imaginative without thinking that we can fix every problem with financial engineering, because this is human business ultimately.
Indeed. Point well made. I mean, as you say, it's possible to go down the rabbit hole of financial mechanisms, but ultimately it depends on a highly convincing narrative and evidence about why this is the good and right thing to do. And I wonder if I might ask Jess, if she was lining up a meeting with the Chancellor tomorrow, and the Chancellor was saying to her, why would something like a year of service or expanding NCS or these kind of things be worth spending public money on? What would you say? How would you try and persuade him?
I guess it's the natural step. Mark was saying earlier about how we're currently not doing enough necessarily to bridge the gap between once you finish school, once you finish your volunteering with NCS, and then onto employment. And I guess this would be the middle bit. This would be the opportunity for young people to get paid for their work, be in a professional environment, working with specific companies that allows them to perhaps be employed long term later on in the specific field, for example, the environment or medical and healthcare. So I think that would be my main argument, for young people to feel secure, to feel supported, to feel excited, and to finally have that purpose, especially as I know that perhaps the way we look at how the economics have been affected by COVID, there may be more opportunities for young people than we perhaps yet imagine. But I think that for a lot of young people, they're currently in limbo, and if we're able to get them moving, get them supported, get them feeling more comfortable, then I have more confidence, then absolutely we should be doing that for our young people.
Yeah, I think it's a very persuasive argument. Thank you. We are nearly out of time, so I'm just going to touch on a point has come up in a few questions from Claire, Kieran, Adam and others, which is about this sense of ownership. It's all very well designing a vehicle and thinking about a year of service. Of course, it will mean nothing if the young people don't want to come and be part of it, and if they're not highly motivated to stick with it. And a lot of that seems to be about having the right causes to serve, as well as the right model of servant leadership. And I think many people have touched on this, but there's a strong sense of, yes, big global missions matter, the Greta Thunberg missions matter, but actually what also matters, and probably is more motivating, is something very concrete, very local, a person or an institution or something that I can actually have a tangible difference and make a tangible difference to myself. So how do we make sure that in the design of something like a year of service, that those missions, those local missions, as well as the grand ones, are at the center of the design, and young people themselves are helping to determine what it is that they are serving? Mark, if I can come to you, and I have to ask everyone to be very brief in their responses, so we can close on time. But Mark, how would we go about doing that?
The two ways. So as a national body, you set the framework and the infrastructure and the expectations, but it's delivered locally. And one of the exciting things about this pilot is that they will be recruited locally by partners who are embedded in their communities. And the pilots that we've got range from some of the local things that you've described with an element of choice. And what we'll learn are what are the things that really attract. And we've done a lot of market research on the three this year: healthcare, public service and the environment. But these local groups and some of the organisations, Catch 22 in Salford, working in the Southwest, as well as national partnerships with local reach, St John's Ambulance, British Red Cross, Muslim charities. So I think it's being really clear on the impact, the expectations we wish to drive, and then empowering and working with the local delivery providers to really make sure it's connected and embedded in the heart of the community.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. David.
And just to say, the Young Foundation, through the Institute for Community Studies, as part of a much bigger piece of work, we'll be looking at what actually works best in terms of engaging with young people, and then to try and help spread best practice. There's some, as Mark's just said, some really good programs which do engage right from the beginning, the young people in shaping and designing. We've just got to spread that best practice.
Yeah, brilliantly put. Thank you. Danny.
I won't add anything. I mean, I completely agree with both of those points, and just being very deliberate that this thing has got to be owned and designed by the people it's supposed to benefit, and it's a hard thing for the politicians to accept. But it's good. I mean, DCMS, to their credit, have been doing a lot of youth engagement in policy work, and I think the more of that we can spread across government, by the way, would be good. But very much agree and echo the point about the new or the old new Institute of Community Studies at the Young Foundation is excellent.
Thank you. Jess, final word from you.
I'd say just ensure that these pilots are taking place in social mobility cold spots as well as hotspots across the country.
Yeah, so targeting the right areas. Yeah, very good point. Diana, finally, you might answer the question, but also just give some reflections as the Minister responsible for this area about what you've heard and what it means for future policy.
Sorry, I had a minor blip with my Wi-Fi. If I froze for a second, you all disappeared, but I'm glad to be back. I think the in a way it follows on from everything we've been talking about. So we've been talking about specific initiatives of different types and how to make them work in practice. But I suppose the thought that came back to me was a phrase I heard in a talk that I listened to, which I recommend to all of you, from Darren Walker, who runs the Ford Foundation in the US. And there's something about the specific that's almost like, you know, we've all, or many of us have done a lot of gardening in the last year. It's sort of making sure the soil's the right temperature and humid enough. So what can we all do, and particularly government do, to make sure that we have the right climate for these initiatives to thrive in? And the phrase that Darren Walker used, he said, I was born in Louisiana. I think he was the grandchild of a sharecropper. He said, I was born in the, you know, a small black boy in the, I was in the poorest 1% of society, and I'm now in the top 1%. And he said, the reason I got there was because I knew my country was cheering me on. And I suppose, you know, if I had a hope, it's that this government can get to a place where young people in this country feel that they're being cheered on, not just by the government, but by their communities, by employers, that we're rooting for you, and that that's the climate that we create for these initiatives to thrive.
Thank you. I don't think you could have put it any better. That is absolutely what we need to do. And I think what's exciting about this discussion, and indeed the concept of the UK Year of Service, is it is another major step forward in being those cheerleaders and providing those kind of opportunities. So thank you so much to our panel. Thank you, Diana, Jess, David, Danny, and Mark. Thank you, NCS, for sponsoring this discussion, and more importantly, for instigating this pilot scheme, which we are all rooting for you and doing everything we can to help make sure it's a success. And it will grow and grow and grow, just like the original NCS did. Thank you once again to everyone. Thank you to our participants and for the superb questions we've been on.